Perfect. I see that YouTube is now streaming.
And we're going to go live on Zoom.
Okay, you can mute that. Is that Ivy?
That's me. I'm trying to shut down my emails.
Oh, that's okay.
That doesn't
All right,
do
so we are now live on Zoom as well. SIP 45 has officially begun, shelter in place 45, with a very, very special edition. And I can't wait to get to our first guest this evening. Chad Angelo, who is in the house, was SIP number 1. Chad Angelo, winemaker for Angelo Cellars. Diane Yetter in Chicago. Barbie Heffernan, I think in Texas. Jan Kiefer, Chicago. Jeff and Jane Greasy. Jeff and Jane Greasy are in the house. They're in Barrington, Christy, so you actually probably know where that is. They have been on every single SIP that we've had, even ones that were practice rehearsals. They've joined us. So there's not much to do in Barrington on a Friday night except join virtual wine tastings. Leah Dunn, some gentleman who I believe you know, Pete Coors. Peter, it's a name I'm familiar with, Pete Coors. Welcome, Mr. Coors. Scotland Kiefer, also from Chicago. Jimmy Sangren from Indiana. This is going to be a fun event. We are delighted. And this is a perfect example of what we talk about in the wine industry of kindness, supporters, and family. Because we first met Christy a couple of years ago, and it was an introduction through one of our charity partners who said, I think you need to meet this person. And that was an unbelievable gesture of kindness to introduce Christy to us. That person then became a charity partner of ours, Patriot Education Fund, and is doing amazing things with the military. Anybody that is drinking this wine, hello, Elizabeth Heffernan, Janet Kowal. If I mispronounce these names, talk with our production studio because I get these all in advance. Jim Brubaker from Colorado. You might know this family. Little known secret, I helped finance most of their houses because I bought a lot of beer attending school at Colorado State. So we'll talk royalties afterwards, Christy, of some sort of fashion. But I want to talk and show people they're drinking the Syrah. I'm going to be drinking the Syrah, and we're going to talk about the entire portfolio. But many people always are curious about a couple of different things. And it's really, how on earth are these people getting the wine in advance? And then also, what do I need to do to go and order the wine after the event? And so when you look at Syrah for Wine Folly, that's not what I wanted to show you. This is what I wanted to show you. They order these SIP virtual tasting kits. So the SIP virtual tasting kit actually has the next several Fridays in a row that they already pre-ordered a while back. So they have 4, 5, 6 Fridays in a row, all wine sent to their house. This is the Goosecross that we're featuring tonight, the 2016. For those of you that have never heard of Cellar Angels, my name is Martin Cody, co-founder. With me in the production studio, Mission Control, is Denise Cody, also Ivy, who is the brains of the outfit from a social media standpoint. We are digital storytellers. We focus exclusively on Napa and Sonoma wines that more often than not you can't get, and that is exactly the case this evening, because unless you are visiting this picturesque area behind me, where if you look closely in this window, you can actually see Christy waving. It's a little feat that we have some technological pull and some pretty special features with a new app that makes that happen. But I do want to welcome Christy this evening because she's been kind enough to give us an hour of time to talk about really a magical journey that she's been on. So without much further ado, my honor and privilege to introduce Christi Coors Ficeli. Thank you for having some time with us this evening.
Thank you. Cheers. I'm excited I actually get to start drinking. It's 5:04. So you've had me for 4 minutes past my cocktail hour.
Oh, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We know you don't start at 5. Come on, please. Well, so for those of you that don't know Goosecross, and many people, since you're 100% direct to consumer and it's not available in stores, not available, around the country, smaller on the production side, tell people kind of where you are in the Valley and a little bit about Goosecross.
Awesome. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And I know the support of Cellar Angels is fantastic. And we love partnering with these guys and doing stuff with them. So Goosecross is a tiny little family-owned winery. Myself and my family own it. And I love this place. We are right in the heart of the valley. So if you look at Martin, he's sitting on the Mayakima Mountains. And that's what's behind me. And if you look through Martin to the mountains in the clouds, those are the Vaca Hills. And I have a hard time calling these mountains because I'm from Colorado and they call them mountains here, but
You can say Vaca Hills. It's okay.
So that's the Vaca Range. And Goosecross sits right in the middle of the valley. So we're about a quarter mile from each side of where the hill starts going up. And we're in Yountville. So Yountville is most famously known for the French Laundry. So if any of you have ever had the pleasure of dining at French Laundry, we're right down the street off the crossroads. And the valley is at its widest part 7 miles wide. At its skinniest part, which is about where we are, is about 1.5 miles wide. And then it's 27 miles long. So it's not a very big valley, but a lot of big things come from it. So we're kind of on the northern side of the southern end of the valley. Does that make sense?
And I'll show them exactly where it is with our good friend Google Earth. Diane Yetter, who is commenting, saying, I loved my visit there last March, right before shutdown. And Jim Brubaker has been there.
Yes.
So
awesome.
This is fantastic because it's funny, and I'll show this when we get to Google Earth, because if you've been to Cliff Lady, you've probably been within a pitching wedge distance of this winery.
Correct.
It's not that far away. However, having 50 plus trips to the valley, it took me quite a while to finally go and meet Christi. And it was an introduction because I've driven by your winery probably 30 times. And this is the little bit of magic that I love about Goosecross. So you purchased it in 2012? 2013. And there was a winery there before that the State Lane Vineyard had been planted, and you had a vision though. So walk us through kind of what you were looking for and how you decided upon this property.
Yeah. So, I spent 15 years in the beer business prior to coming here, and I dealt with distributors and retailers and going into grocery stores and liquor stores and selling my beer. And so when I was coming to Napa, I thought that's really what I wanted was a larger winery and I can work with distributors. So we started looking for that. And then I was working with some folks, Zapponi and Company, who are phenomenal M&A folks, if anybody's ever thinking about getting into the wine industry. They took me to this little winery called Goosecross. And I was like, what is this? I've never heard of it. And we pulled up and I was like, oh, okay, this place is not bad. But it needed some work. And we sat out in the tasting room of the old building, which is kind of off of my left shoulder. I don't know if that's really your right shoulder or if you're backwards, but it was kind of on the north side of the property. And we sat there and I tasted the wines. I was like, oh my goodness, these wines are really good. And I was like, teach me about this direct to consumer stuff. I didn't know anything about it. And I knew I could order wine online and all that kind of stuff, but I didn't understand how to make a full business out of it. And they explained it to me and I was fascinated. I was like, I don't have to deal with distributors anymore. I don't have to go into grocery stores anymore. And I love those guys, believe me, they were some of my favorite times, but being able to-
I can tell.
Yeah.
Well, most people know, and I think you know too, we owned a bricks and mortar wine store in Chicago for 7 years. So we're quite familiar with working with distributors. And you're right, some are fantastic people and they do amazing things. And those are the ones that we still call friends.
Correct.
Yep.
And there's some that aren't so amazing.
Correct.
But being able to be one-on-one with the customer, I mean, you guys can see behind me, we still have a few folks out on the patio tasting wine.
Yeah, those aren't extras. Those are actual customers. So it's good news that the winery is open, thankfully. Yes. That's fantastic.
And actually right there is Bob Bialy. So Bialy Vineyards, if you ever heard of them, they're small as well, just like us. They're right down the roads. They're great partners of ours. So he kind of snuck in this afternoon to come to a tasting. So I figured I'd mention him and say, hi, Bob, even though I didn't get to go out and see him. But what I saw in Goosecross was that it was a hidden gem, right? We're not off the main roads. We're not even off one of the crossroads. You have to go onto a road off the crossroad before you get here. And it needed some help. It needed a facelift. And so we did a facelift on the buildings. So we tore down the old winery and the old house and we built this beautiful new tasting room that I'm sitting in today. We built the deck out back so folks could sit and overlook the vineyards as they're tasting their wines. We built a brand new state-of-the-art winery for my winemaker, who got to design it the way he wanted and put the things in it that he wanted. And it's been fantastic. We what I love is that Bill talks about the wine, and he said, when I got here, I knew that the wine needed a little bit of an evolution, not a revolution. So we didn't drastically change the wine style, but we changed the nuance.
Don't say anything about Bill yet, because we've got some quiz questions later. But I do want to show people this patio.
Yes.
And this is actually how most people like my interview style, off camera. Stop talking. But this is a vision, Christi, that is pretty darn impressive, because when you walk in, you get to see right through. And it's almost as if you're not, but it's almost as if you're surrounded 360 degrees by glass from the way you have it set up and laid out. And you have brought the outside in, especially like when you're sitting inside, but more often than not, you want to try to taste outside. And it's spectacular.
Yeah. And when the sun goes down a little bit further, I'm going to open the shades and the windows so you can see. Right now, I have to have those down so you can see my face, which you probably don't really need to see my face, except Mom and Dad, who just said that I'm looking good. So appreciate it, guys. And so you can see it. But Martin's got a great picture behind him of what it looks like. And, you know, when we went through the pandemic and we had to close for a while, and then when in California, we opened up outdoors only. And everybody's like, oh my goodness, I have to figure out outdoors. And I was like, not me.
Right.
I'm good for outdoors. It's a
No,
little.
and it's funny you say that, because we hear from obviously a number of wineries that have not put a lot of thought into their outdoor space. And so figuring out, okay, 6 feet, 25% capacity, what do I do? And how do I achieve this limit? And so it was a real headache for them. This is about as picture perfect as you can get. So congratulations on that. And it is a little bit, it's not off the beaten path. I mean, I'll show people where it is. You're just outside of Yountville. And yes, there's the French Laundry, but there's Bouchon, Ad Hoc, Bistro Gentil. There's quite a few good eateries there.
And great hotels as well.
Yes.
Yountville, it's a great walking town. If anybody ever wants to stay somewhere where you can walk and you can taste, you could rent a bike and come right out to Goosecross. It's about 1.5 miles out here from downtown Yountville. So.
Oh, wow. That is close. That's a perfect example. The 1.5 miles from downtown Yountville.
Other than a 1.5 mile ride to Goosecross, I would not suggest biking and wine tasting. I don't know how people do it.
No, they do. They don't do it often because there's usually a wreck. And speaking of wrecks, Jeff, very nice of you to point out my flying skills. Christi, during the holidays, there is a flight simulator in Zoom, or on Google Earth rather, that is not easy if you've never flown a plane before. And so I thought I'd take the entire audience on a trip from SFO to wine country, and we crashed in San Francisco. So you'll read the chat later. Jeff is kind enough to remind people that I killed everyone. But this is the tasting room that I think you need to go to when everyone starts traveling again, because of its A, location, but B, magic, and also the wines. So let's talk a little bit about the 2016 Syrah that's in the glass. And I'd be curious, given your background, from the distribution side of things, from understanding the retail side of things, your take on Syrah, or your take on GSMs as a whole. Because I know when we had the store, and even sometimes to a degree for Cellar Angels, the GSMs, Syrahs specifically, they were a challenge to sell, because people were like, give me Cab, give me Merlot, give me Pinot, the big 6 grapes. Yet Syrah, and I'm already seeing some of the comments where people are saying, this is amazing. Walk us through Syrah, why you do a Syrah, how you discovered it. Give us a little bit of feedback on that, because it's a magical, magical varietal.
It really is. I feel bad for Syrah. It's kind of like the ugly duckling of wine, in reputation only, not in as wine, but in reputation only. And it's just, it used to be an amazing grape, and it used to sell out all over Napa. And everybody has pulled out their Syrah vineyards and planted Cabernet, because you can actually get more dollars per ton for Cabernet.
Right.
Makes sense why farmers would want to do that. But Syrah is one of those wines that is versatile, and I think it can go anywhere. It could be made as big as a Cab, or it could be made light like a Pinot. And it just kind of depends how you use your barrel regimen and your blending process, and what you add to it. That to me differentiates the Syrah from one end of the spectrum to the other. And
Completely agree. And not only versatility standpoint in the glass, but we paired it this evening with Chilean sea bass and a balsamic reduction sauce, and it was incredible.
yeah,
So it's, and from a quality to price ratio, when you look at a price standpoint, if you were blind tasting against Cabernet, the pricing is amazing.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I like the ugly duckling analogy. I think you're right.
Yeah. And it's, I feel bad for Syrah. Like I said, I love it. I think it's a fantastic grape. It's a fantastic wine that Bill makes for us. Janie, who works in my tasting room, I was talking to her about this call and I was like, oh, what should I pair it with? And she goes, oh, I had a bottle of it last night with some barbecue lamb. And she said it was phenomenal. So it's a great barbecue wine too, but I had never thought about Chilean sea bass with the balsamic reduction. I'm gonna have to try that.
I think the sauce was the key because it was a nice balsamic reduction. So it had that weightiness to it.
Yeah.
And the sea bass was ridiculously thick piece. And so it had some heft to it. It's not a light flaky fish. So this had some oomph and the wine was marvelous with it. I'm looking to my left because I'm looking at the bottle, but of course no one can see the bottle. It's off camera, Martin's first time on camera. So here's the label, little beautiful picture of kind of the vineyard and the winery behind us. But also the namesake, the Goosecross.
Goose.
And it is kind of an unusual name. It's not named after a family member, I hope, but tell us a little bit about where that came from.
So this is one of my favorite stories, and I didn't name the wine. It was already called Goosecross when we bought the place. Had been a brand. It's been a brand since 1985. Was their first vintage, and they used to do Chardonnay because this whole vineyard was planted to Chardonnay at the beginning. And so when I was asking the previous owners, I was like, where did Goosecross come from? And they said, oh, it's a fantastic story. So Pat and Ray, the former owners of their house, which was right here where I'm sitting, would sit on their back porch and have their cocktail, usually a Manhattan or a glass of wine in the evenings, and they would watch the geese fly. There's a pair of geese that live on State Lane. So the road, and I'm sure Martin will show you this, the road that you take to get to Goosecross is called State Lane. There's a pair of geese that live on State Lane, and the story goes that the male goose hurt his wing when they were migrating south for the winter. And they were from Canada, and they were going south for the winter to be warm. And when the male goose hurt his wing, his female partner dropped out with him, dropped out of the flock to make their home while he could heal. Geese mate for life. They're the only waterfowl that actually, they're the only waterfowl that don't have to actually migrate. So they don't have to go south for the winter, but they mate for life. So the two of them made their home on State Lane, and they realized, hey, California is not that bad. It doesn't snow. It's not cold. We have plenty of water because we get rain. So we're just going to stay here. And their flock came back to the north when the winter was over, and they were heading back north for the summer, and they didn't go with them, is the assumption, right? Because they're still here. And so the former owners would sit on their back porch every evening around sunset, and they would watch the geese fly from their home, which is on the corner of our property. There's a little lake over there. And they would fly to the Napa River, which is right behind me. And they would go over there for dinner and drinks, get a little tipsy, and then, it's a short jaunt to stumble home. And so they would watch the geese cross. And so that's why they called it Goosecross.
I love it. And if you're just tuning in, welcome to this week of Field and Stream, where we're talking waterfowl, goose. Actually, welcome to Sean Manning in Colorado. We have a whole Colorado contingency. Nick Schramm, Martha Schramm. Martha, we have a sneaking suspicion here at the company that since you placed an order for 3 bottles of the Syrah this evening, that you may have went into your bottle early, had it, and decided ahead of the episode that you wanted to get more. Mark Salazar, hello, sir, to you. Mark Challenor. Leah Dunn, I may have said. Kay Jurica, good to see you in the house. Hans and Caitlin Greasy, those are children of Jeff, because again, this is a family program. So everyone invites they're 11 and 12, but I'm sure they're not drinking. I'm teasing, Christy.
Yeah.
Also in Colorado. But so I love the name the Goosecross. And is there any, I don't know what offspring of geese are called. Do they have grandchildren? Goslings. Well, that much I knew. Thank you. Are there any goslings still around from the original pair?
So I don't know the exact answer to that, but I don't think the original pair is still here. every spring we will see little gosling running around. And so I'm assuming there's been generations of them that have been here. Now there's two that I see on a regular basis, but I've seen 7 to 10 of them flying in a flock over to the river. It was funny when you guys were out here filming for our last deal with you guys. We're sitting on the deck. It was a beautiful sunny day. We're sitting on the deck, and all of a sudden we heard the honking, and I was like, and I'm like, oh my
God. How was it? How was it?
And I was like, oh my God, the geese are in the vineyard. So I walked over to the vineyard and I scared them up. So they were walking through our vineyard, and I scared them up, and they took off. And your camera guy got film of the geese flying, which was like, I couldn't have paid somebody.
Yeah. And I'm sure James, knowing James, and he's been our camera crew for 7 years, was probably going crazy with how cool that was. So thank you for sacrificing yourself for the video. There's a lot of love that goes into those videos.
Oh yeah.
The Syrah I love. There's a couple folks that are talking about the Syrah. And I also know that, as I'm mentioning and looking at all these people, there is a Chicago contingent that's on. And on Chicago, I apologize, because I understand it's not going to be above freezing tomorrow, much of like 1/3 of the country. So I'm glad you're all hunkered down with a great bottle of wine. But Christi, you have a couple Chicago stints in your past. So tell us about, where you lived and why and what years we're talking about.
Yeah, so my husband grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So for those of you in Chicago, it's just around the lake. And we met when we were living in California. We were living in Modesto, California, working for Gallo. And we stayed out here for a while, and he wanted a little bit of change. And I had an opportunity to take a job with Coors out in the Midwest. So we decided, we were young, no kids. We decided, hey, let's go live in the city and have a wonderful time enjoying Chicago. And so our first stint there was 2005. We got married in 2003. So our first stint was 2005 to 2007. And then we moved to Colorado for about 4 years after our son was born in October of 2006. And then we moved to Denver after that for about 4 years. And then I got another job opportunity back out in Chicago. So we moved back into Hinsdale, which is just, I call it the near west suburbs.
Right.
Because it's not Naperville, it's halfway from the city to Naperville, in between those two. So yeah, and then we were there for another 2 years, and we left Hinsdale to come out to Napa.
And then so your first stint in 2005 was, you said Bucktown?
Bucktown. Yeah.
Okay, I think we certainly some people that know Bucktown on the session this evening. And your father is telling us it's currently 9 degrees in Denver. So, but it's a dry 9.
It's a dry 9. Well, I was talking to my sister, so I'm very jealous. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. And I'm very jealous that my whole family is getting together tomorrow to play paddle tennis or pickleball, whatever it is. And then they're all having dinner together for Valentine's Day. And I was really jealous until she told me it was 7 degrees today. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not so jealous anymore.
No. And seriously, and tomorrow's Valentine's Day? That
Sunday.
could be troubling.
Sunday.
Oh, Sunday. A lot of shopping time left.
You have all day tomorrow.
Exactly. All right. So we've discussed the Syrah. And when you purchased the property and you purchased the original winery, they had a ton of SKUs. And I think that was pared down intelligently so. And now you've got a pretty impressive portfolio. And I want you to walk us through kind of the vision of the portfolio, where you see it today and where you want it to be.
Yeah, so I think we have finally gotten to the place where we want to be. It took a while. There was a lot of inventory. We had when I purchased the property, we had a off-dry Chenin Blanc that I still have about 24 bottles of. If anybody's interested in a 2011 Chenin Blanc, call me.
Off dry though, that's the cellar.
So it's sweet. We did an orange muscat that was very sweet. We did a Riesling that was also sweet. So people would be like, where should I go to taste sweet wines? And I'm like, oh, I'll go over to Goosecross. I'm like, but we make beautiful Cabernet and Syrah and Zinfandel. So we kind of got rid of the sweet ones. So our white wine portfolio is simple. It's Sauvignon Blanc, Rosé, and Chardonnay. So our rosé, we just released it today.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
For Valentine's Day. It's called Rosé for Lucy, and Lucy's my baby girl. Love
Aw.
you. And it's pink, you know, girls pink, even though she doesn't wear pink anymore, but she did when we named it after her. And our red portfolio from our estate is really the wines that I like to focus on.
Okay.
We make a Cabernet, a Merlot, and a Cab Franc. So any of you Cab Franc fans out there, we make a phenomenal Cab Franc. We also make a wine we call Hallie's Block. So Hallie's Block is the block of the vineyard that's right behind me. It's our best block of land. It's about a little under a half acre of land.
And just fun fact, that's what's in Peter's glass tonight. And his gracious kindness and generosity is unmatched, because he says it's so good, he would like to send a bottle to everyone on the call. So that is impressive. Thank you, Peter. So this is Hallie's Block. And who's Hallie's Block named after?
So Hallie is named after my grandmother, so my dad's mom. She was a beautiful woman, very well manicured, very well put together, brilliant, sweet, kind. She was an ambassador with President Reagan. She started charities around the world. I mean, she was an amazing woman, and we figured we'd name this amazing wine after an amazing woman.
No, that is outstanding. That does sound like a great portfolio. And I like that you're at a comfort level here with enough SKUs to please anybody that's walking in. So when it gets warmer, you've got some great white wines. You've got obviously a red wine program that is really second to none from that standpoint. The C. Elizabeth. Talk to me about that one.
Yeah, so C. Elizabeth is a separate project that my husband and I are doing on the side. So it's, you know, not only do I have a full-time job here at Goosecross and a full-time job managing my 2/3 children, if you include my husband. But we decided we weren't busy enough, so we threw in this extra project. So my husband really manages that.
You have to love entrepreneurs. Let's just throw one more thing on the plate.
Another one. And let's buy a building, and let's do this, and let's rent this. And we've got too many balls in the air. So he's really managing that project. And it's something, I'm C. Elizabeth. My mom, who is also on the call, her middle name's Elizabeth. My grandmother was Elizabeth, and now my daughter, Lucy, her first name's Elizabeth. And so this wine is a big kind of kick you in the teeth Cabernet, named after a bunch of big kick you in the teeth women.
I mean, I love that story, because you know better than anybody, women in the adult beverage business is a tough ceiling to crack. Women in wine is, I think, the next level up of ceilings to crack. Yeah. And so to pay homage to a bunch of tough, you know, go get them, grit, persistence women, I think is a magical thing. So congratulations on that.
Thanks.
We talked about the winemaker Bill a little bit earlier, yes, but I'd be curious. I don't know the story on how you landed Bill.
I got really lucky.
Yeah.
It was a game of fate. And so the former owner was also the winemaker. And he said he would stay on with me for a year until I found a winemaker. And so we purchased the property in April of 2013. And by the fall after harvest of 2013, we started looking for a new winemaker. And we interviewed probably 20 different winemakers. We tasted wine from all of these different winemakers. And I didn't fall in love with any of them.
So back up. So when winemakers interview, they bring samples of stuff they've made?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty
awesome. So I should just keep interviewing people, even though I'm not going to hire anybody.
Exactly. I see a theme here.
I've never really thought of it that way. But I think you have a great new plan. Yeah.
Well, and here's another interview thing that you can do when you're interviewing marketing people. Give them the off-dry Chenin Blanc, the Moscato, and the Riesling, and say, here, how would you package this? And then just sit back, and it might be a good way to get, to move some of that inventory.
There you go.
So Bill brings samples of things he's made.
Yes.
And you sit back, and for those of you that don't know, why don't you tell them a little bit about Bill's background? It's slightly impressive.
Slightly. So prior to coming to us, he had spent 12 years at Duckhorn. So Duckhorn Winery is just up the road from us. And he got to Duckhorn after living in New Zealand and making wine for a wine company called CJ Pask, who really helped him hone his skills and become the winemaker that he is today. So he was at Paradox, which is just north of us. And then he was the winemaker for Duckhorn. And then he was the executive winemaker for all of their properties. So Duckhorn has 5 properties. And he was the executive winemaker. And he left there in December of 2013 because he was tired of being administrative. He's like,
Right.
I'm a winemaker. I want to make wine. And I
want to get back in the dirt.
Yeah, I want to get my hands dirty. He's sitting in meetings and conference calls and spreadsheets. And he's like, I wasn't making wine anymore and it wasn't fun for me. So I fondly refer to him as Duck, Duck, Goose, because he went from Paradox to Duckhorn to Goosecross. He doesn't love it when I call him that, but he's not here. So I can say that.
I'm so sending him a personal handwritten thank you note and addressing it to Duck, Duck, Goose.
Address it to Duck, Duck, Goose. Everybody here will know which box to put it in.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so I had found the one guy that was pretty good and was going to be a decent fit for me. And I gave him an offer, and he responded to my offer saying, you know what, I thank you for the offer, but I'm really going to try for this new executive winemaker job that opened at Duckhorn. And I was like, oh, okay. I didn't know they were looking for a new executive winemaker. 2 days later, Bill calls me and he's like, hey, I hear from one of the barrel suppliers that you're looking for a winemaker. I'm like, yeah, where were you? And he's like, oh, I was at Duckhorn. I'm like, oh, you know, pieces started falling into place. It's a very small valley. And so he came in, and from first moment, you know, we hit it off, and he is one of the best business partners I think I've ever had. This morning I was feeling a little grumpy, and he's like, come on, Christi, let's go in the vineyard and have a bitch session. So we went out in the vineyard and we talked, and I got a bunch of stuff off my chest, and I came back and I'm like, oh, I feel so much better.
Well, here's I think what is resonates in that story, which I think is pretty kind of special, where Bill recognized that he was sitting in an office and, like you said, pushing pencils, pushing spreadsheets, managing all of the administrative stuff. Not that it's not mandatory, but as a winemaker, that's not what you want to be doing.
No.
And he recognized it before 20 years had disappeared. And he was at the tail end of his career realizing, God, this has been an absolute brutal grind for 20 years. And then he gets to find you, and you have the wherewithal to be able to say, yeah, let's actually connect these dots. He wants to get back into the dirt. I mean, it's just very symbiotic and serendipitous about how it happens. And I think it's a testament to both of you that you're pursuing things and paths crossed, and now we are the benefactors of that. So I'm delighted. And actually, I think the chant is going up for Google Earth because we're talking about where you are. So let me just kind of show people exactly what we're talking about as to where this whole special vineyard property is.
And I'm going to mute you while you Google Earth, and I'm going to open the window behind me.
Okay, perfect. So for those of you that are new, this is our favorite blue orb, and we focus on one area of the world as it relates to wine only, and that's Napa and Sonoma. So we talk a lot, interestingly enough, about dirt, and this is a special region of the world for wine because of its soil. And there's 10 main types of soil. The 3 big ones here are sandy, loam, and clay, and each of them have different attributes, but there's all sorts of different sub-series of soils. But Napa and Sonoma, this being Napa County right here and Sonoma County right here, they have some of the most diverse soil subspecies in the world. So every winemaker loves to make wine here. The alluvial fans, the silt, the volcanic, the sedimentary, igneous, it's all here. And you get so many different soil structures and types that weave them away through these hills and river valleys and floodplains, that it's just a canvas of wonderful tapestry to be able to make wine. So this is the region Cellar Angels focuses on. This Syrah vineyard that we're tasting this wine from is located here. Now, Christi and I haven't talked about estate fruit yet, because this is not estate fruit. This is typical in the valley when you have a winery the caliber of Goosecross. You know a bunch of people, and you can have partnerships and agreements with people where they farm to your specifications, and actually to your standards. So this is Monticello Road here. This is Vichy Road here, but this tiny little family-owned vineyard block that you would know is there if you were driving by here is where they source the Syrah. So it is a pretty special place. This is in North Coombsville for our AVA savants out there. And we all know the magic of Coombsville and how many huge wineries that have tremendous press were sourcing fruit from Coombsville and not telling anybody for years, till Coombsville finally had enough and said, we're going to be our own AVA. So now let's take a look at where Goosecross is from a standpoint of relation to the Syrah vineyard. So as Christi mentioned, just right outside of Yountville. So as you move up valley from downtown Napa through Oakno, Yountville, Rutherford, St. Helena, you can go a little further up, you'd see Calistoga, but you get an opportunity here to see that this is kind of in the foothills of Coombsville, but Goosecross is a little bit right between the mountain or the hill ranges, because it's not really mountains at all here, but this is where Goosecross is. So we'll go take a look a little bit closer. As you can see, almost right through the topography, it's on the valley floor, but here's the Napa River that you referenced earlier. So you have, if you can imagine, hundreds of thousands of years of this flooding and moving sediment and shells and rocks and stuff into this soil, and then that compacting down and then changing every single, eon, if you will. It's just a really, really rich, fertile area to grow wine. And then the beautiful, beautiful tasting room, I'm just going to call it paradise, right here.
Awesome.
So that was what Christi built from the ground up in 2015 that it opened. And this is the beautiful patio behind me that I'm showing you. And it really is, I think you probably ultimately have to leave at some point in time, but you won't want to.
No, sometimes we kick you out.
Sometimes they do kick you out.
Martin, can you go back to the Goosecross 2 photo or Google Earth? I wanted to point out a few little things that make Goosecross kind of what it is. Okay. So you see the tree line kind of on the bottom of your screen. That's the Napa River, like Martin was talking about. Just below that, in that vineyard right there, yes, where the hand is, that is where we get our Sauvignon Blanc grapes from. So
Okay.
we pick our Sauvignon Blanc grapes right from across the river. It's a fantastic, again, family-owned vineyard. I know the grape growers, and they're phenomenal. And then if you look up in the top left corner, you see the little lake that says Rector Dam. I think that says Rector Dam. I don't have my glasses on, but yes, where the hand was, that's Rector Dam, and they dammed it a long time ago. But that used to flow through our vineyard. So right behind me, it's kind of hard to see because we have cover crop growing, but that's an old creek bed from the Rector Creek. So it would come down from where the water is, it would come through the valley and down here, and then it would meet up with the Napa River just south of us. So our vineyard is technically on an old creek bed.
I was going to say, you're on a floodplain, creek bed type of thing. Yeah.
So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your Google Earth. I just wanted to throw
Are you kidding me? I love a tour guide.
in there.
That was fantastic. So it also, it just lends credence to just how special the soils are.
Yes.
And so I'm interested in Bill with 12 years at Duckhorn. And when he called you and said, yeah, I heard you're looking for a winemaker. Did he bring samples over from Duckhorn, like 3 Palms? You're like, yeah, I've had all these. What have you done lately?
He brought me 3 Palms Merlot, and we opened the bottle and tasted it. And I'm like, can we just keep drinking? The most phenomenal 3 Palms Merlot is one of my favorite Merlots I've ever had, except for the one from our property, by the way, which I think is a little bit better. And priced a lot less than the 3 Palms. I think 3 Palms is up to $140 or something. So
it has, yes.
Yeah. So yeah, he brought all Duckhorn stuff. I was like, dude, bring me some of the New Zealand stuff. It's like, yeah, I'd be 12 years old. It's probably not very good anymore.
No, exactly. And that actually reminded me of a question that I meant to ask people, because not many people know where Bill is from. They know you mentioned that he has done a stint in New Zealand.
Yes.
But winemaker Bill arrived at Goosecross in 2014 and is a native of what famous wine region? So if I'm just going to go out on a limb here, if there's not 100% answers, actually I'm joking. Let's see, because I want to see how many people are paying attention.
Yes, please.
Let's see if there's anybody else I can say thank you to. Carmen Buffington, I don't know if I saw Amy McGowan, first time here on Zoom. She was a long time Facebooker.
Awesome.
Good. All right, I'm going to give this 10 more seconds. 5, I count fast.
Local Germany,
4,
I would guess.
3, 2, 1. All right, so I need 4 people in the chat section to tell me who they are that voted for Mendoza and Piemonte.
What's going on over there?
So Nick Schramm, oops, he says, yes, Bill is actually from Hawke's Bay, New Zealand.
Yes, he is actually from Hawke's Bay, New Zealand. And
So
sometimes it's very hard to understand him. When he asks me about the bottling schedule, and I'm like, what, huh?
Tell me his influence on the Sauv Blanc.
Great question. He actually does not, he prefers Napa Sauv Blanc to New Zealand Sauv Blanc. And so our Sauv Blanc to me is a lot more tropical and fruity than green apple grassy. So you'll get a lot of stone fruit, some passion fruit from it. And so he likes to make it in the Napa style instead of in the New Zealand style because that's his preference.
Yes, I had a dear friend, very close friend, where I was giving him a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. I said, you're going to love this, 100% grapefruit. It just screams grapefruit. And he goes, I hate grapefruit. I'm like, you are not going to like this wine at all then. But
yeah.
So yours is more tropical fruit. And so tropical fruit is less acidic.
Less acidic, but you still have the brightness.
Correct.
Right. So you get a lot, to me, when you have a more acidic wine that has the green apple acid or the grassiness to it, you lose a lot of the fruit because the acid is overpowering. And so what I love is that ours is a little bit lower acid. And when I talk about acid, it's fruit acid, not pH acid, because pH acid is good for wine. It's less orange, lemon, that.
Right.
So.
Kind of that citric. And so when you are sitting with Bill and designing kind of the portfolio and doing the blending and picking the wines, how much influence, I mean, there's got to be a great dynamic there. There has to be a great play. And I love the laughing already because I know there's story after story after story. So normally these stories go like this, where the winemaker says, I want to go this way. And the owner says, well, we're going this way, type of thing. Or I want this. So how do you balance that? Tell me about these stories.
It's actually really, and I'm laughing for a reason because it happens every time we do blend tastings. So Bill will come in with 60 different variations of our Cabernet that we could make. And we taste through all 60 of them. And usually we spit. So you don't come out drunk, but you come out with a purple mouth. And we taste through 60 wines and we rank them. We do it in sets of 4. So we rank them A through D, 1 through 4. And sometimes Bill and I are totally opposite. And there's very often when I'll pick one and he'll pick a different one and he'll say, no, Christi, you're wrong.
And then you say, hey, Bill, would you like to go out in the vineyard and have a bitch session?
About you. And there's, so then we ultimately land on one, whether I'm right or not. We really talk through why I like what I like and why he likes what he likes. He's very technical about his tastings. And when we're doing these blend trials, he's very technical and I like the acidity and I like this and I like that. I'm more about the flavor and the ability for the consumers to enjoy it. So that's why we kind of meet in the middle really well. But actually, I don't really know what he's putting in the final blend, right? Because we taste about 6 weeks prior to bottling, and then we'll filter it and get it, put it in the bottle. And by the time it's in the bottle, I don't have a chance to change it. So he could just say, you know what, forget it. I'm choosing my blend, not Christi's. But he does.
Or like you agree that that's your blend, and then you go home and he's like erasing things, and no, we're not going to do that. So Jeff has a question that is actually kind of linked to a question I'm going to ask you via the poll. So he says, Christi, you can go into your cellar and pick any bottle of Goosecross from any year and any varietal. What do you open to drink? Now, don't answer that yet, because we're going to guess. We're going to guess another, because it's kind of polling question number 2. And I'm going to omit vintage, because if you had just one bottle to choose from your own portfolio, it would be, and I'm admitting vintage because that can throw things off. 12 was an amazing vintage, so you could be partial to 12, even though it might not be your favorite. But so admitting vintage, you're running out the door, dinner's waiting at home, you're grabbing a bottle, not that this ever happens. And what do you grab and why? So I'm going to give this, what is Christi's favorite wine? This is like your desert island wine. Yeah, we used to, we did, thank you. We had the Jeopardy music, but it was too expensive. So now we just ask people to hum.
So now you don't have to pay me, so you just get me to do it.
It is. So we're going to give this 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. So now, interestingly enough, I'm surprised of that answer. But Cab Sauv, Goosecross Sauv Blanc, we talked about. You talked about the Rosé, Syrah, or I even gave people an out. You're torn. You don't know which one to pick. Is the last answer.
Well, the politically correct part of me would say I'm torn because I love all of my wines. Good answers. If I want a white wine, it's definitely the Sauv Blanc. That is my go-to. I love our Sauvignon Blanc. But if I were to pull any bottle out of my cellar, it's the State Lane Cab Franc. Hands down, number 1. I am obsessed with that wine. We sell out of it every year by June. We release it in March and we sell out by June. The 16 that we just finished last June, I didn't even get a bottle to take home. It's gone. We do have some in the library, so when we release the library, I'll be able to get some. But yeah, the Cab Franc.
And just for folks, remember that it is a working winery. They are open, so you will hear people talking in the background, enjoying wine.
They're checking out. They're buying some. What are you guys buying over there? They're not even listening to me. They're pretending I'm not even here.
So hands down, it's the Cabernet Franc.
Hands down.
Now, were you a Cab Franc lover prior to Goosecross?
No, I don't think I had ever tried a Cab Franc prior to Goosecross. I don't remember one.
Wow.
Yes.
And Cab Franc, it's interesting. We talked about the ugly duckling earlier with Syrah. Cab Franc's kind of another one. It doesn't have that same cachet commercially. Yeah. However, enophiles and wine fans, when they can find a great Cab Franc, hands down, it blows people away.
Yeah. Cab Franc for a long time was known as a blending grape, right? So people would use it to blend with Cabernet because Cabernet sometimes, if you think of your tongue as a donut or as a circle, there's a hole in the middle. And Cabernet often leaves out the middle part of your palate, like the donut. And the Cab Franc does a great job of filling that donut hole. So that's why Cab Franc has always been a good blending grape. Jason, just a little bit. Sorry, I'm trying to corral the troops over there. Cab Franc is a really hard grape to turn into a single varietal. It's a very finicky grape right around harvest time. So I was asking Bill about it. I was like, why is some Cab Franc so good and some Cab Franc so bad? Well, if you pick Cab Franc too early, The pyrazine, so that's the bell pepper that you taste in Cab Franc, will come out really strong. If you pick it too late and there's too much sugar, it'll taste like stewed bell peppers, which I think is even worse than the regular bell pepper.
Right. If you're going to find something worse than bell pepper, it's stewed bell pepper.
Bell peppers. And it's a factor of Cab Franc. Cab Franc has those pyrazines in it. And so when I was talking to Bill about our Cab Franc, I was like, well, how is ours good? And I've tasted so many, because after I got here, I was like, oh my God, I love Cab Franc. And I've tasted hundreds of them now. I order it every time I can find it on the tasting menu. And he said, I have, when our Cab Franc's getting close to being ready to be picked, I have our vineyard team on standby. So he'll call and he'll say, we are going to pick the Cab Franc sometime between Friday and Wednesday of next week. And I need you guys, when I pick up the phone, you're coming the next morning, or you're coming later that afternoon. So it's a balancing act. So he'll both taste it for sugars as well as acidity, making sure that the pit is, the little seeds in the grapes are ready. And he will taste it every day, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day, and he'll sample it. And then he'll be like, come tomorrow morning. And he picks it that morning.
Wow. So the window for harvest is that narrow.
In his opinion, yes. And to me, it works. So I let him do it.
No, and I love Cab Franc, but you're right. You can taste hundreds and 99 of them will have way too much green bell pepper. And it's off-putting, and you almost have to force yourself to taste the 100th because you've had 99 bad experiences. Yeah. And you have to dig within and say, okay, I guess I have to try another Cab Franc. But then when you find one, it usually has a fantastic price point and it just over delivers. So I'm so glad that you guys produced the Cab Franc.
Yeah, thank you. And we're releasing our 2017 Cab Franc in March, kind of mid-March. So keep your eyes out for it.
You got it.
We make about 100 cases.
Yeah, and that's not a lot. The decision to buy a winery.
Yeah.
Again, one of those things where I'm sure you had a couple other things on your plate. It's like, hey, let's buy a winery. I mean, you're obviously familiar with Napa from going out there a couple of times and falling in love with it. You worked for Gallo very, very early on. How did you decide to leave the beer business and decide to buy a winery and get into the wine business?
It's stupidity.
And that concludes this episode's of Entrepreneurialism.
I bet my mom and dad are laughing at me too right now. You know, the big joke of how do you make a small fortune in the wine industry? Start with a large one. You know, I had this passion for wine. My job at Gallo was, you know, Gallo at the time, this is the late 99s, early 2000, when I worked at Gallo, and they did a lot of wine sensory stuff. I left Gallo to go to business school in Denver, but I had my love who stayed at Gallo. And when I graduated and he was done with Gallo, we moved into Napa and lived here. We tasted some beautiful wines, and we knew what we were doing because of the education that Gallo had given us. So when we lived in Napa, he was working at Behringer and I was working for Coors, and we fell in love with it. We fell in love with wine. We fell in love with the industry. We fell in love with the community that's here. And we had a dream that one day we wanted to be back here, but we knew careers were going to take us elsewhere.
Sure.
So, you know, my family started this little investment group, and they wanted to give my generation, which is the 5th generation Coors family members, the experience to run their own business. Because the businesses that we currently own are large and hard to get the experience you need to be actually running a business and a full P&L and responsibility for the banks and everything. So when they tapped me on the shoulder and said it was my turn, I said, I want to do a winery. And they said, you're stupid. But they let me do it. So that's kind of how I ended up here. It's been a passion of mine since 2000. And in 2013, we made it a reality.
No, and I'm thrilled that you did and had the courage, and sure that comes obviously from the lineage of, like you said, 5 generations of courageous women and being in an industry, but you pursued it. This property behind me is about as majestic as it gets. And I would imagine there's some days where you kick yourself for having made this decision. And there's other days where you pinch yourself and can't believe that you've actually done this.
Yes.
Or twice a day, this might happen.
You know what? I think every day is a little bit different, right? So there's some days that I'm pinching myself and kicking myself on the same day. What I have loved about being here is that every day is a new experience and every day is a learning. We were bottling today and we were bottling our Branta, which is a red blend. So if you speak Latin, please forgive me if I totally mess this up, but Branta is Latin for black goose. So it's our red blend that kind of looks black in the bottle. And the labels wouldn't go on. And you know, they pull up a bottling truck and it pulls up, they pop the sides out and they run the wine through. Labels wouldn't go on. And I'm kicking myself. I'm like, why did I do a white label? And why is the white label so big? And why has it worked in years past and not now? But it was a learning experience. I'm sitting there with the truck operator, and you know, he's tinkering with things and playing with things. And it was amazing. So although I was kicking myself about this issue that we were having, I learned a ton. And then afterwards, Bill and I were laughing about it, and we're like, okay, well, next year we get to make a black label for the black instead of a white label. So, you know, it's fun. Every day is something different.
Well, that is a good point. Every day is something different. And I was just going to ask you, are you still having fun? Does it still feel like a dream?
Every day. Every day. I love it. I love what we do every day. There's some days when I'm, you know, putting together my 5-year business plan for the family, or I'm dealing with employees that are having issues, that for a moment I struggle. But when I am struggling, when I'm having a bad day, I get to go walk in the vineyard and I clear my head, and it's so peaceful and it's so relaxing, and it just brings me back to center. And then I come back and I'm having a good time again. So yeah, every day. I love what I do.
No, and it shows. And Chad Angelo, fellow winemaker, talks about the Syrah and Cab Franc from this winery is awesome. Everyone I know is really, really enjoying the Syrah. We are eternally grateful for the graciousness of your time this evening, and certainly having some laughs and some great wine with us. The family is impressive, and I can't wait to see what the children do. I know they're a little young to be, you know, putting together their 5-year plans, but I'm sure it's on the horizon.
Oh, we've got more.
But I think it's just another testament to, you know, the customers that we have on. We actually really don't call them customers, we call them supporters. Yes. Because they've been in this tent a long time, and they want to see and meet folks like you, and we give them that access. And tonight you made it all happen. The weather worked out perfectly. We can't thank you enough. So cheers to you. And
I'm almost done.
And just based upon what you said, I would go down to the library and grab 6 or more bottles of the Cab Franc and just put those in the trunk of your car and take those home, because they're going to be gone.
Yes.
So
I know. They're hiding. I've hidden some this year for the 17th.
There you go. Exactly. There's some couple of false wall boards that have some wine behind them and things like that.
I've learned my lesson. After I didn't get any of the 15 or 16, I've learned my lesson, and I take mine early.
I don't blame you. Well, Christi, thank you so much. I just want to remind everybody that on the 26th, you're going to be looking for a different style sip. We're going to be doing a little bit educational series, and that's going to be a lot of fun. Next week, we have Knightsbridge from the Napa Valley, crafters of ultra premium Chardonnay and Cabernet Sauvignon. We're going to be tasting their Chardonnay. But as we started this episode, we can't thank the kindness of people, everybody that has been kind to Cellar Angels, the supporters that buy the wine, and also the introduction that Mark Slaby made from Patriot Education Fund to Christi, and what they do for military families will bring a tear to your eye. So this tent is big. We would love to have more people inside the Cellar Angels tent. Tell your friends, be good to one another, stay safe, stay warm. Christi, thank you so much. Have a wonderful